All right, welcome back to World History 2. We're back to part 2 with Unit 6, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the world and where the world is after the English Civil War. So, the English Civil War that we left off with last time brings in democracy, it brings in parliament, people can vote, we have power of the people, we have constitutional monarchy now, we have a Declaration of Human Rights. So, people are getting rights and they're becoming a sort of power in the world. When we started this class, the Pope was the top dog, and then it went to kings like absolute monarchs like Peter the Great and Louis the 14th, or the Sun King. And now we're kind of getting a little splash of, well, maybe the people should have the power. So we're going to democracy, but it's going to take several units before we get to democracy. Even today, not every country has democracy. It's still like probably close to 50-50. So we'll talk about that. So the Enlightenment is going to happen due to the English Civil War. Other countries are going to lust for that democracy, and it's going to start revolutions and conflicts, and people can start writing things that they believe. So the divine right of kings, saying that kings were put in there by God and you question them, you're going to be killed, is not really going to be a play anymore. So what's going to kind of happen is the Enlightenment is going to apply reason to the human world. So it's going to be natural. We're going to have religious tolerance. We're going to have democratic revolutions. So we have some different guys here. So starting off, we have Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes is a guy from the old school of thought. Okay, you got Hobbes here, and the way I remember this is Hobbes is a snob, and the book he writes is called Leviathan. Leviathan, as you guys know, is a sea monster. He says the giant sea monster that's going to be the problem for the world is democracy. You see in the picture he drew for his book, or whoever drew it for his original book, the Leviathan. The man, the king here, is comprised of the people. So he says an absolute monarch. People should obey an absolute monarch for the safety and protection of a king. If we have democracy, you have several little beings, all individuals that all have their own wants, their own lusts, their own needs. So it's hard for democracy to work perfectly. He says an absolute monarch, you should sacrifice your safety and support an absolute monarch. He stays with Louis the 14th, very big supporter of the absolute monarch. But Hobbes is a snob, and he comes from that cavalier point of view from the English Civil War, okay? So another guy's going to come in that would be his absolute arch nemesis, believes the absolute opposite, and that's going to be John Locke. And he's going to write a book called Two Treatises on Government. And he pretty much comes up with the ideas, and how I remember John Locke is, well, what the L did John Locke do? His last name starts with an L, Locke. He writes about three fundamental things every citizen should have in England. And you should have life, so you should have the freedom of your life. You should have liberty, so you should have democracy and freedom. You should have land, because there's a shortage of land. And all of that makes him a liberal, because he wants a new world. And we'll talk about that in Unit 8, difference between a liberal and a conservative. And he is a component of limited government. He wants to limit the power of the government and give it to the people. He says if government does not obey the people, they should have a revolution and overthrow it. Very firm believer on that. Okay? John Locke is our main guy. Thomas Jefferson copies him in the Declaration of Independence. He says life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. John Locke says life, liberty, land, because there's a lot of land in the New World. So he says natural rights. Another guy is Montesquieu. Montesquieu. I don't want his quotes, but Montesquieu believes in separation of powers. He says there should be three branches of government: the judicial, which is the courts; the legislative makes the law, or like parliament; and then the executive could be a king, could be a president. He says that we should have checks and balances. Each group keeps each other in line and in check, and in turn, they keep each other from being too corrupt. And we use this in the United States today very much. How you remember that is his name has three syllables, Montesquieu. And how many branches of government do we have? We have the judicial, legislative, and executive. We have three branches of government. He has three syllables in his name. Next is Rousseau, and he wrote the social contract. We'll remember that by saying Rousseau. There's Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He's a French guy, and he says that government should be a contract. What is a contract? It is two parties agree and consent to rule and lead with each other. So he says that both parties have to agree and get along for government to work successfully. Okay. Then finally, a very famous one that wrote Candide is Voltaire. And Voltaire is going to say that we should have separation of church and state. In France, where he lived, it was still common that the crown and the pope could have you arrested, send you to court. And he tries to separate that you should not have power with religion. Not everybody's that religion. We should have separation of church and state, which we also use in the United States today. Thomas Jefferson and the founding fathers really copy these guys, bring them together. It gives us the Constitution, our Bill of Rights, how our government's set up. Even Hobbes, with his idea of absolute monarchs, we have a strong national government that trumps our county and local government, or our state government. So with this, it's going to lead eventually. So it happened in England, and we have a constitutional monarchy. Things are bad in France. Currently, we had Louis XIV. He's going to put us in a lot of debt building his palace at Versailles. We're going to have Louis XVI. And Louis XVI is not going to be that bad of a guy, but his predecessors put him in so much debt that there's going to be a problem. There's 3 estates in France, okay? The problem is taxes, as most conflicts are. You see here in this political cartoon, you have the 3rd estate being ruled by the 1st and 2nd estate. Let's break them down. The 1st estate is the Catholic clergy. They do not pay taxes. They do not do anything. They're about 1%. They do not have to pay. They do not pay any taxes to benefit the government. The 2nd estate consists of nobility, about 2% of the population. They own about 20% of the land, but they pay no taxes. The other percent is 97%. And that's your working class. They pay almost all the taxes, and they don't benefit from them. So they're going to be upset. They're going to have a tennis court oath. The Enlightenment's going to influence them. And the first event that happens in the French Revolution, it's going to be the storming of the Bastille. And the Bastille was a French royal prison. It had royal subjects that were caught by the monarchy and held for various crimes, and they're going to be freed. They're going to tear this down and actually build a road that they're eventually going to send Louis XVI on when they behead him. And the French Revolution is also going to be a big part of it when they take over. They're going to move Louis XVI and call him Citizen Capet. And Citizen Capet just means citizen number 1, and they make him wear this little outfit as they change their government. They allow him to live. He's very careful. I know I've just went through the French Revolution pretty quick, but there's not a lot that you need to know about it. You need to know that Louis XVI's monarchy is going to end as an absolute monarch. The people are going to overthrow them relatively quick, but a reign of terror is going to ensue when democracy takes hold too quickly. Okay, so they went from one problem of an absolute monarch to too much democracy. And the reign of terror is characterized by this right here, which is nothing more than beheadings. So beheadings, they're going to use the guillotine instead of, in the day they used to have royal prisoners executed with an axe to the back of the neck because it was ethical. They would hang others, everyday people. So they bring the guillotine in as an ethical instrument of execution. It's not meant to scare. It's meant to be an equalizer. And it is an equalizer. They used it all the way up to the 1970s, almost 1980. So it was a very ethical method compared to what they had used before. But you just drop it and it cuts their head off instantly. So Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette are going to one day try to escape, and they're going to try to get to Austria, where Marie Antoinette's from, but they're going to capture them because the story goes at a bar he tries to pay for some food, and his face is on the coin. So they capture him, they bring him in, and they realize they're going to kill him because they can't trust him. They think Austria will maybe overthrow them. So they're going to have him executed, and they're going to have him and Marie famously executed. And then we're going to go to Napoleon. Napoleon's going to come in and bring nationalism and the Enlightenment with him as he spreads throughout Europe. If we look at a map of Napoleon's conquest, he takes all of this. You see all this border here, all of this in Europe in a few months. He goes into Russia. That doesn't end well. Most of his troops are going to die. He goes with about 400,000, ends up with under 100,000. I think it's around 14,000, not many at all. But the only players against him is going to be the British, the Portuguese for a time until they eventually have to run away. Sweden and Russia are going to be the big guys that hold against him. But Napoleon is going to bring nationalism. He's going to bring the Enlightenment. He's going to spread women's rights and expand individualism, secularism. And he's going to change the old world of Europe as we know it. Here's a better map of Napoleon's empire. He conquered a lot, and it's going to take several armies. After they defeat him, he's going to be in exile. Then he's going to raise another army when he gets out of exile and escapes, and he's going to do the exact same thing. He's super popular. He spreads nationalism. And with Napoleon, it's going to change the entire focal point of Europe. We'll talk about him a little bit more in next unit. But with the Enlightenment comes more leisure. People start to think for themselves. The individuals, they begin to write, reading and writing, literacy, religion. Everybody's point of view changes on stuff. We get guys like Bach and Mozart that start to compose music for entertainment. We have Cervantes, who's going to write the first fiction or fake book that's just read for entertainment. Before, pretty much the only book printed was the Bible, and we go now to Cervantes writes a book called Don Quixote about a guy that fights windmills, about knighthood and the ending of knighthood. We're moving into a new age in the world. You're also going to have Eugene Delacroix, and he's going to start the Romantic period. Delacroix paintings. And he's going to document a lot of stuff like Liberty Leading the People here, a very famous painting, as well as some stuff with Napoleon. And of course, when you look at his pictures, there's a very big focal point. It's a very, very beautiful art style, but it has purpose. They start doing things like looking at exotic animals, and he paint them larger than life. You look at some of his, he makes them big as mountains. I mean, it's just no one had seen a tiger in Europe before. So it's exoticism, it's romanticism, it's nationalism. What else is going to happen is all-weather roads. So we're going to be able to trade and travel more. New designs in farm tools. With new roads, you can travel year-round. Before, when the mud happened, even war quit until the spring broke and the weather got a little bit better. New designs in farm technology. You could feed more people. You could use less land and have more yield. Less people had to be farmers, so people could be other jobs and occupations. We're also going to have improvements in ship designs, which is going to lower the cost of transportation of goods, which in turn lowers the cost of goods, which means people can have more of it and more people can start their own shipping businesses. It gets cheaper all around. So the world is evolving around a capitalist ideology, and we'll get to that very soon as well. All right, that will conclude Unit 6. We will get back with Unit 7.